Hello! Pete's Packs here, and we're back with Throwback Thursday, episode number 24. This is our first episode of 2025. So yeah, let's get into this. Today we have the Seattle, August 1998 World Championships. And today we have the World Champion, Brian Selden. World Champion Brian Selden's deck conquered the field by using Survival of the Fittest to put creatures in the graveyard and Recurring Nightmare to bring them back into play. The deck employs more than 20 creatures and dips into blue for Lobotomy. Ah, Lobotomy. Good old days. Back when you'd play Lobotomy or Jester's Cap to mess with your opponent's deck. We still kind of do that with things like Stonebrain. Let's take a look at Brian Selden's deck. Let's see. Deck contents. Main deck. City of Brass. 3. 8 Forest. 1 Gemstone Mine. 2 Carpolution Forest. 2 Reflecting Pool. 1 Swamp. 2 Underground River. 2 Undiscovered Paradise. 1 Volrath Stronghold. 4 Birds of Paradise. 1 Cloud Chaser Eagle. 1 Mana War. 2 Necrotol, 1 Orcish Settler, 2 Spike Feeder, 1 Spike Weaver, 1 Spirit of the Night, 1 Thrall Surgeon, 1 Tradewind Rider, 2 Octavia Orangutan, 1 Verdant Force, 4 Wall of Blossoms, 2 Wall of Roots, 2 Firestorm, 2 Lobotomy, 4 Recurring Nightmare, 2 Scroll Rack, 4 Survival of the Fittest. On the sideboard, we have 4 Boil, 2 Dread of Night, 3 Emerald Charm, 1 Hall of Gemstone, 2 Phyrexian Furnace, 2 Pyroblast, and 1 Staunch Defenders. Nice. Quite a mix there. So let's take a look at what we have here. Let's see, collect all 4 World Championship decks. Of course, you got Brian Selden, the World Champion. That's what we have tonight. And then we've already done Ben Rubin, the finalist, Brian Hacker, quarterfinalist, and Randy Bueller, 12th place. So let's take a look at what we have in here. Oh, hold on. Brian Selden's deck conquered the field by using Survival of the Fittest to put creatures in the graveyard and Recurring Nightmare to bring them back into play. The deck employs more than 20 creatures and dips in blue for Lobotomy. Oh, it's the exact same as on the back. Alright, so let's start with the sideboard. Dread of Night for black, it's an enchantment. All white creatures get -1/-1. Just a good hoser for White Weenie. We have 2 Dread of Night. Boil. 3 in a red. Instant. Destroy all islands. For when you really don't want to lose to mono blue. We have 4 copies of Boil. Basically, you wait for them to tap low or tap out, and then you shove through a Boil and protect it with Pyroblast. Pyroblast, for red, you have an Interrupt. All interrupts are now instants. Counter target spell if it's blue, or destroy target permanent if it's blue. We have 2 Pyroblast. Then we have Hall of Gemstone. 1 green for an Enchant World. Enchant World is still around. It just has slightly different text now. You can only have 1 Enchant World in play at a time. So, during each player's upkeep, that player chooses a color. Until end of turn, each mana-producing land produces mana of the chosen color instead of its normal color. Very nice. Good way to throw off... It's a really good way to throw off mono blue decks. And there's some interesting interactions with different things with it. Generally, you can play around it with your Birds of Paradise, but it's a good way of shutting down the mono blue decks so you can shove through a Boil. Phyrexian Furnace, one of the best pieces of graveyard hate that was available at the time. For 1, it's an artifact. Tap, remove the bottom card of target player's graveyard from the game. This is why graveyard order matters. And then 1 sacrifice Phyrexian Furnace, remove target card in any graveyard from the game, and draw a card. 2 copies of that. We have Staunch Defenders. 3 white for 3/4 human soldier. When it comes into play, gain 4 life. This was one of your defenses against burn. and mono red aggressive strategies. Also, to a lesser extent, the mono white deck. We have Emerald Charm. For green, you get an instant. Choose one, untap target permanent, or destroy target global enchantment, or target creature loses flying until end of turn. So global enchantment would be non-aura enchantments. So enchant worlds are global enchantments also. So it's nowadays it would just be enchantment or non-aura enchantment specifically. I believe it's what the errata is for this. We have 3 Emerald Charm. All right, Brian Selden, World Champion. Brian Selden, a 17-year-old high school student from San Diego, California, says his deck revolves around the interaction between Survival of the Fittest and Recurring Nightmare. The former is used to put creatures into the graveyard, and the latter can bring them into play. With this combo, Selden is able to use his creatures to react to his opponent's threats. The deck also contains over 20 creatures, many of which have an effect when they interplay or perform some other useful function, such as the Spike Weaver. Unlike many similar decks, Selden dips into blue primarily for lobotomy. He said this was the key to many of his victories. So quite often, you would just remove all of your opponent's threats by, or like key combo pieces, stuff like that with lobotomy. Really useful card. Right. Starting things off, we have Swamps with beautiful art by Brahm. Tempest Swamp. Forest by Douglas Schuler. I believe we have 8 forests, all by Douglas Schuler. Yep. Probably should have gone over the art for the sideboard, but it's alright. Gemstone Mine. Art also by Brahm. Funny enough, Brahm is also an author. Actually in the middle of reading a book by him now. Alright. Gemstone Mine, land. Comes into play with 3 mining counters on it. Tap, remove a counter from it. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. If there are no mining counters on Gemstone Mine, bury it. Underground River. Good old Ice Age art. Land that taps for colorless, and then you can tap for a blue or a black, and it deals 1 damage to you. The art by Nini Thomas. We have 2 Underground Rivers. Next we have Reflecting Pool, art by Adam Rex. Land that taps to add 1 mana of any color that your other lands could produce. So for instance, if you have Underground River, it can produce blue or black, colorless. Gemstone Mine, it can produce mana of any color. Which is kind of the combo there. You have a Gemstone Mine in play, and your Reflecting Pools tap for 1 mana of any color. We have 2 Reflecting Pools. Same with Undiscovered Paradise. Undiscovered Paradise land. Art by David O'Connor. Tap and 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. At the beginning of your next untap step, return Undiscovered Paradise to its owner's hand. 2. It's a good way to get around a number of effects. Unfortunately, does not get around Stasis, because Stasis says skip your untap step. Good old City of Brass. That beautiful art from Arabian Nights. So land, whenever it becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. Keep in mind this is important for if you have something like Icy Manipulator in play, you can tap down your opponent's lands. Rashadan Port, same kind of thing. And it will deal 1 damage to them. And then it has the ability to tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Also a cool thing, if you have something that reduces damage, like Urza's Armor, or for instance the One Ring, it doesn't deal any damage to you. Art by Mark Tedden. We have 3 City of Brass. Next we have Volrath Stronghold, a surprisingly expensive land. It's a legendary land with art by Kev Walker. Taps for colorless, and you can pay 1 and a black and tap it to put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Next we have Carplusion Forest, art by Nicola Leonard. It's a land that taps for colorless, and then you can tap for a red or a green, and it deals 1 damage to you. Also currently in Standard. Next, we have what makes this deck ridiculously expensive. A card that sees a ton of play in pre-modern and is banned or restricted in every other format. The only formats you can play it in are Vintage, Legacy, or not, actually not Legacy, it's banned in Legacy. Vintage, Commander, and pre-modern. But Survival of the Fittest, 1 and a green, enchantment. For a green, choose and discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, put that card into your hand, and shuffle your deck. You reveal the card, of course. We have 4 copies of Survival. It has that wonderful art by Pete Ventures. Next we have Wall of Roots, art by John Matson. 1 and a green for a 0/5 wall. Put a -0/-1 counter on it. Add green to your mana pool. Play this ability as a mana source and use this ability only once each turn. So it's a mana ability, but you can only use it once a turn. Nice way to ramp up. Still sees play in modern in things like most core decks will run it. Like Yawgmoth, the black-green Yawgmoth deck runs it. Alright, next we have the classic bird, Birds of Paradise. Classic art by Mark Poole. For green, it's a 0/1 creature bird. It says summon mana birds. It's the old type line for it. With flying, and then tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. 4 copies of Birds of Paradise. Funny enough, this is very close to the existing deck for pre-modern, the Survival Rec deck. Next we have Wall of Blossoms, art by Heather Hudson. 1 and a green for a 0/4 wall. When it comes into play, draw a card. We have 4 copies of Wall of Blossoms. It is one of our primary card advantage engines. We have Uktabi Orangutan by Una Fricker, or art by Una Fricker. 2 and a green for a 2/2 creature ape. I believe it's a monkey now. When it comes into play, destroy target artifact. This was our... is it Viridian? It's not Viridian Enchantress, is it? There's a functional reprint of this in Mirrodin. And its name is escaping me at the moment. If you know the name of it, leave it in the comments. 2 copies of Uktabi Orangutan. Next we have Spike Feeder. There is a sort of infinite life combo with this, but also this is just a good way to build backup life. 1 green for 0/0 spike. Comes into play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. 2, remove a counter from it, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then you can remove a +1/+1 counter on it to gain 2 life. Art by Heather Hudson. We have 2 Spike Feeders. Next we have Spike Weaver with art by Mike Robb, or Robbie. 2 green for a 0/0 spike. Comes into play with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. 2, remove a +1/+1 counter from it. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And 1, remove a +1/+1 counter from Spike Weaver. Creatures deal no combat damage this turn. So it's a reusable fog. Basically for 3 turns. Next we have Verdant Force. Art by Dieter Lizzie. This was one of the big reanimate targets at the time. But 5 green for a 7/7 elemental. During each player's upkeep, put a Saproling token into play. Treat this creature as a 1/1, or this token is a 1/1 green creature. Just token generation that happens on both players' turns. So worst case, it's a blocker. Often it's used to feed your survival, or not survival, your recurring nightmare. Orcish Settlers, art by Pete Ventures. 1 in red for a 1/1 orcs. XX red, tap, sacrifice Orcish Settlers, destroy X target lands. So for 5 mana, you can destroy 2 lands. For 7 mana, you can destroy 3 lands, so on and so on and so on. Just good way to get some advantage. Firestorm. For red, it's an instant. Choose and discard X cards. Firestorm deals X damage to each of X target creatures and or players. Good way to get things into the graveyard and clear the board. Also, deal some damage to your opponent's face. We have 2 copies of Firestorm. Next we have Scroll Rack. Or art by Jeff Miracola on Scroll Rack. Or not Scroll Rack, Firestorm. Scroll Rack. Art by Heather Hudson. 2 mana artifact, 1 tap. Choose any number of cards from your hand and set them aside. Put an equal number of cards from the top of your library into your hand, then put the cards you set aside this way on top of your library in any order. It seems kind of pointless unless you have something like Survival of the Fittest to shuffle your deck. In which case, this just becomes a massive card advantage engine. Well, card selection engine, not card advantage engine. So, very, very powerful with anything that allows you to shuffle your deck. We have 2 copies of Scroll Rack. There's a reason it's a fairly expensive card even now. Next we have Lobotomy. 2 blue-black, sorcery. Look at target player's hand and choose from any of those cards other than a basic land. Search that player's graveyard, hand, and library for all copies of the chosen card and remove them from the game. That player shuffles his or her library afterwards. Now, if you have a way of shuffling this back into your deck, or just using it more than once, you can strip just about all the win conditions from your opponent's deck, or you can really disrupt them. Worst case, it's a duress that goes and gets the other copies of it. So, we have 2 copies of Lobotomy, and it has art by Thomas Mbaxa. Next, we have Cloud Chaser Eagle, art by Una Fricker. 3 and a white for a 2/2 bird with flying. When it comes into play, destroy target enchantment. Until we got, I think it was Monk Idealist. It was either Monk Idealist or Monk Realist. This was the best creature for destroying enchantments. So, and it's a 2/2 flyer. So. Next we have Tradewind Rider, art by John Matson. 3 and a blue for a 1/4 spirit with flying. Tap and tap 2 untap, or tap and tap 2 creatures you control. This later, I believe, was errata to tap 2 untapped creatures you control. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. So, at one point, this was used alongside a number of things, including Stasis. But the big thing with this was just locking your opponent out of lands. You know, bouncing their land every turn, or bouncing whatever they played over and over again just to deny them resources while you built up resources. Still a very strong strategy, especially with something like Mana War. With art by John J. Muth. 2 and a blue for a 2/2 jellyfish. When it comes into play, return target creature to its owner's hand. You can return your opponent's creatures or yours. This is also a key component in decks like Alurin, just because it is a great utility card. Next we have Spirit of the Night for if we're on the aggro plan. Art by Cliff Nielsen. 6 black, black, black for a 6/5 summon legend. I think it's a legendary spirit now. But it has flying, trample, and protection from black. First strike when attacking, and it's unaffected by summoning sickness, so it has haste. Just really, really strong beater. Thrall Surgeon, art by RK Post. 1 and a black for a 1/1 Thrall. 1 and a black, sacrifice it. Look at target player's hand and choose one of those cards. That player discards that card. Play this ability as a sorcery. Notice that doesn't say non-land card. You can force your opponent to discard lands with this, which is part of what made it so strong. Also, you can keep bringing it back with Recurring Nightmare. So, it is a repeatable way to remove cards from your opponent's hand. Next we have Necrotol, art by Adrian Smith. 2 black, black for a 2/1 summon Necrotol. I believe it's now a human rebel? Or human assassin? But it has first strike, and when it comes into play, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. And it says bury target non-artifact, non-black creature. It's basically terror on a body. We have 2 copies of Necrotal, and then our last 4 cards are Recurring Nightmare. Just another fantastic card. I believe this is actually banned in Legacy at the moment. With art by Jeff Laubenstein? Jeff Laubenstein, I believe that's right. 2 and a black, enchantment. Sacrifice a creature, return Recurring Nightmare to its owner's hand. Put target creature card from your graveyard into play. Play this ability as a sorcery. So, later on, this ended up being abused with cards like Deranged Hermit. But just about anything that can produce tokens is really strong with this. You can play this as early as turn 2 with your Birds of Paradise. So if you have a creature if you have a way of getting a creature into the graveyard that early, you can do some really nutty things. But the idea is to just keep recurring really strong creatures that you're getting off of Survival of the Fittest. So, you pay a green, go get something, pitch something else into your graveyard, bring it back with Recurring Nightmare, rinse, repeat, and profit. So, kind of the whole engine of the deck, and we have 4 copies of Recurring Nightmare. Now to go over the artists from the sideboard, since I skipped over them earlier. Emerald Charm, we have art by Greg Spolenka. 3 copies. Staunch Defenders with art by Mark Poole. Phyrexian Furnace, art by George Pratt. Hall of Gemstone, art by David A. Cherry. Pyroblast, Kaya Foglio. Boyle, Jason Alexander Benke. Thread of Night, Richard Thomas. Nice. Alright, well, that was the 1998 World Championship deck, or World Champions deck. And that rounds out our series on the 1998 World Champions. Funny enough, this is actually really similar to a deck that is still played in pre-modern now. So, it does live on. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. As always, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff for the algorithm. I really appreciate it, and we are trying to grow to 1,000 subscribers, so if you're not subscribed, please consider it. Yeah, until next time, stay awesome. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.